Iran's missile strike on Dimona. Israel's nuclear ambiguity faces its greatest test. In a dramatic escalation of the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, Iran has launched a missile strike on Dimona, a city in southern Israel that has long been at the center of global speculation due to its association with Israel's secretive nuclear program. For over 3 weeks, the world has watched as missiles have rained down on Tel Aviv, central Israel, and various military installations. However, the attack on Dimona marks a significant turning point, not only for the conflict itself, but also for the decades-old policy of nuclear ambiguity that Israel has maintained. A city shrouded in secrecy. Dimona is not just another city in the Negev desert. It is home to Israel's Nuclear Research Center, a facility that has never been officially acknowledged by the Israeli government. For over 60 years, Israel has neither confirmed nor denied the existence of a nuclear weapons program at Dimona. The facility has never been inspected by the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, despite repeated requests. This policy of deliberate silence, known as nuclear ambiguity, has served as a cornerstone of Israel's security strategy, deterring adversaries while avoiding the international scrutiny and obligations that come with formal acknowledgement. The existence of the nuclear facility at Dimona is one of the world's worst-kept secrets. Intelligence agencies, nuclear experts, and journalists have long pointed to the site as the heart of Israel's nuclear capabilities. The facility reportedly includes a heavy water reactor, plutonium reprocessing infrastructure, and a stockpile of nuclear devices estimated to number between 80 and 400 warheads. Yet, officially, Israel has always maintained silence, and the IAEA has never been allowed to set foot inside. The attack, a new phase in the conflict. On the 23rd day of the current conflict, Iran fired a barrage of missiles at Dimona. Unlike previous attacks that targeted population centers or military bases, this strike was aimed at the city that houses Israel's most sensitive and secretive facility. The Iranian missiles managed to breach Israel's sophisticated air defense systems, which have been under immense strain due to the ongoing conflict. As a result, 180 people were injured in Dimona, a city whose most significant resident is a nuclear reactor that, officially, does not exist. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, claimed responsibility for the attack, stating that it was in retaliation for Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Iranian state media made it clear that the strike was a message. Israel's nuclear infrastructure is within reach, and Iran has the capability to target it if provoked further. Air defense under pressure. The success of the Iranian missile strike on Dimona has raised serious questions about the effectiveness of Israel's air defense systems, particularly in the south. Throughout the conflict, Israel has prioritized the protection of major population centers such as Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, allocating most of its interceptor missiles to these areas. As a result, the southern regions, including Dimona, have been left with thinner coverage. Iran exploited this vulnerability by launching a multi-vector attack, targeting several locations in the south simultaneously. The missiles used were not simple ballistic projectiles. They were equipped with maneuvering warheads, capable of adjusting their flight paths during descent, making them much harder to intercept. This technological advancement has reduced Israel's interception rate from over 90% at the start of the conflict to around 70 to 75% in recent waves. The outcome was inevitable. Some missiles got through, and Dimona was hit. The IAEA breaks its silence. Within hours of the attack, the IAEA issued an emergency statement, something it has never done in relation to an Israeli nuclear facility. The agency confirmed that it had not received any indication of damage to the Nuclear Research Center, but, crucially, called for maximum military restraint, particularly in the vicinity of nuclear facilities. This statement is unprecedented. For decades, the IAEA has maintained institutional silence regarding Israel's nuclear program, in line with Israel's policy of ambiguity. By calling for restraint near Israeli nuclear facilities, the IAEA has, for the first time, publicly acknowledged their existence and the risks associated with military action in their vicinity. The IAEA's warning is not just diplomatic language. It reflects a genuine concern about the potential consequences of a missile strike on a nuclear facility. While a direct hit on the reactor would not cause a nuclear explosion, it could result in a radiological disaster, releasing radioactive material into the environment, a scenario reminiscent of Chernobyl or Fukushima. The Negev desert is not uninhabited. The city of Beersheba, with a significant population, is just 35 kilometers from Dimona. A radiological release could have devastating consequences for the region and beyond. Israel's response: silence and ambiguity. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited Dimona after the attack, describing it as a very difficult evening for the country and condemning Iran for targeting a civilian area. However, true to Israel's long-standing policy, he made no mention of the nuclear facility, the IAEA statement, or the status of the reactor. This silence is deliberate. To acknowledge the facility's existence would be to break with 60 years of carefully maintained ambiguity, a policy designed to deter adversaries without inviting international pressure or legal obligations. Netanyahu's silence, even in the face of a direct attack on Dimona, is a powerful statement in itself. It signals that, despite the unprecedented nature of the strike and the IAEA's intervention, Israel is not prepared to abandon its policy of nuclear ambiguity. The world may know what is at Dimona, but Israel will not say it out loud. Strategic messaging: deterrence and restraint. The Iranian strike on Dimona was not just a military action. It was a calculated message. By targeting the city but not the reactor itself, Iran demonstrated both its capability and its restraint. The missiles landed close enough to send a warning, but stopped short of causing a nuclear incident. The message was clear. If Israel escalates by targeting Iranian nuclear infrastructure, Iran can and will respond in kind. This logic of proportionality and deterrence is central to the current phase of the conflict. Iran's actions are designed to influence Israeli decision-making, making it clear that further escalation could have catastrophic consequences. The fact that 180 people were injured in a city housing a nuclear facility is a stark reminder of how close the region has come to disaster. International reactions: the nuclear argument. The attack on Dimona has shifted the international conversation. Russia immediately called for an urgent ceasefire, warning that the strike had created conditions for catastrophic escalation, and that only a ceasefire could prevent the conflict from taking on a nuclear dimension. China convened an emergency session of its National Security Council and issued a formal statement urging immediate de-escalation, specifically citing the risk to nuclear facilities. For weeks, calls for a ceasefire have been based on humanitarian concerns, economic disruption, and regional stability. The attack on Dimona has introduced a new and far more urgent argument: the risk of nuclear disaster. This is an argument that resonates with every government, regardless of their stance on the conflict's origins or justifications. The possibility of a radiological incident in the heart of the Middle East is a scenario that no one can afford to ignore. The U.S. response and the escalation ladder. The timing of the Dimona strike is also significant in the context of U.S. policy. On the same day, former President Donald Trump issued an ultimatum threatening to destroy Iranian power plants if the Strait of Hormuz was not reopened within 48 hours. Iran's missile strike on Dimona can be seen as a direct response, signaling that any attack on its infrastructure would be met with a proportional and potentially devastating response. Iran's parliament and Revolutionary Guard echoed this message, warning that any attack on Iranian energy facilities would lead to the destruction of critical infrastructure across the Middle East and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The sequence of events is clear. Trump issued a threat, Iran demonstrated its reach by striking Dimona, and the U.S. subsequently postponed its planned strikes, reportedly due to Omani mediation. The missiles that hit Dimona changed the calculus in Washington, introducing a level of risk that made further escalation unthinkable. The end of silence? The attack on Dimona has done what 60 years of international pressure, inspection requests, and diplomatic negotiations could not. It has forced the world to confront the reality of Israel's nuclear program. The IAEA's emergency statement, the international calls for restraint, and the visible vulnerability of Israel's air defenses have all combined to shatter the silence that has surrounded Dimona for decades. While the reactor itself was not damaged, the psychological impact of the strike is profound. The world has seen that Israel's most sensitive facility is not beyond the reach of its adversaries. The IAEA has been compelled to acknowledge the risks, and the international community is now focused on preventing a disaster that, until now, existed only in the realm of speculation. A new phase in the conflict. As ceasefire negotiations intensify, the events in Dimona have fundamentally altered the trajectory of the conflict. The introduction of the nuclear argument has raised the stakes to an unprecedented level. Every decision made by Israeli, Iranian, and international leaders from this point forward will be influenced by the knowledge that the nuclear threshold has been approached and could be crossed. The attack on Dimona is a stark reminder of the dangers of escalation in a region where so much is at stake. It has exposed vulnerabilities, shattered illusions of invulnerability, and forced a reckoning with realities that have long been hidden behind official silence. The world is now watching, hoping that restraint will prevail and that the nuclear dimension of this conflict will remain a threat, not a reality. Conclusion. Iran's missile strike on Dimona has changed the rules of the game. It has exposed the limits of Israel's air defenses, forced the IAEA to break its silence, and introduced the specter of nuclear disaster into the heart of the conflict. The message from Tehran is clear. Israel's most sensitive sites are within reach, and the risk of further escalation now carries consequences that the world cannot ignore. As the dust settles and the injured are treated, the international community faces a stark choice: push for a ceasefire and de-escalation, or risk a conflict that could spiral into uncharted and catastrophic territory. The events in Dimona have made one thing clear: the era of nuclear ambiguity may be coming to an end, and the stakes have never been higher.